My name's Scott Nugent, and I'm a transgender man that fell for the lie that somehow altering my body to look male would make my life better. Well, fast forward, years after the bottom surgery, this is what remains. I get infections all the time and will continue to do so until the day that I die. You see, no child should be subject to gender butchery, and that's what it is, because I've done it. But if we stop childhood medical transition in California, we stop it for the entire United States of America and maybe even worldwide.
I was a teenager. If you told me at 17, if you sat there and told me every single issue, every single surgery that I would have because of a stupid injection that doesn't even work because I cannot become a man, I would have said no. I would have said no, and I would have had a different life.
I am a female to male to female detransitioner. The biggest thing that I regret is the change in my voice.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a detransitioner. Another way to put that would be, I used to believe that I was born in the wrong body, and the adults in my life whom I trusted affirmed my belief, and this caused me lifelong, irreversible harm.
Exactly what I've been saying all along. Let kids be kids. Point blank, period.
At the age of 12, I began to experience what my medical team would later diagnose as gender dysphoria. I was well into an early puberty, and I was very uncomfortable with the changes that were happening to my body. I was intimidated by male attention, and when I told my parents that I felt like a boy, in retrospect, all I meant was that I hated puberty.
You guys will say kids know who they are. They don't know who they are. They're going through a lot of emotions during a crucial time in their life, and they are feeling a lot of different things that aren't always going to be pinpointed later down to being transgender. Going through puberty can affect your mental health. It can affect your self-image. You know, running with the idea that she could be trans when she was just going through a crucial time is insane.
The gender specialist I was taken to see told my parents that I needed to be put on puberty blocking drugs right away. They asked my parents a simple question: would you rather have a dead daughter or a living transgender son? The choice was enough for my parents to let their guard down.
Whoa. Can we talk about manipulation at the highest form, especially in a medical practice? It's wild and insane to me. Why would you even think to say that to a parent? Number two, why are you so quick to put children on these puberty blockers because quote unquote they're irreversible, which they're not, instead of diving deeper into the root of the problem, which there could be another problem that isn't transgenderism. It could just be a mental health crisis. Our first thing is to pop these kids on these hormones. That'll solve all the problem.
I was fast-tracked onto puberty blockers and then testosterone. The resulting menopausal hot flashes made focusing on school impossible. I still get joint pains and weird pops in my back, but they were far worse when I was on the blockers. A month later, when I was 13, I had my first testosterone injection. It's caused permanent changes to my body. My voice will forever be deeper, my jawline sharper, my nose longer, my bone structure permanently masculinized, my Adam's apple more prominent, my fertility unknown.
For all the people that say, oh, it's not happening to kids, it's a right-wing conspiracy theory, where are you guys now? Because it's real silent. And this detransitioner is coming forward and speaking her case. Now, mind you, there are probably so many others that aren't doing that. So now we have to really think about it. Okay, so this stuff is happening. Now she has to live with the, you heard it, irreversible effects of these hormones given to her at the age of 13. I feel so bad for this poor girl because she has to deal with these things forever.
My name is Claire and I'm a detransitioner. A week after I turned 14 years old, I was put on testosterone by Dr. May Lau at Cook Children's Hospital in Dallas, Texas. 6 months later, Dr. Alan Doolin with the American Institute for Plastic Surgery in Plano performed a double mastectomy on me. I was too young to get a tattoo. I was too young to drive. I hadn't even learned algebra in high school yet. But I was old enough to choose to have healthy parts of my body electively amputated. I was sold a product, medical transition, by professionals and institutions who told me that it would fix my distress and save my life. I was told that if I didn't do this, I would probably end up dead. But here's what they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me that taking cross-sex hormones and undergoing major surgery at 14 years old could leave me with pelvic floor dysfunction and urinary incontinence, problems I have to manage now as a young adult. I'm only 20 years old. They didn't tell me that these complications are common enough to be known risks, and yet they were hidden from me at an age where I didn't even understand what these terms meant, let alone the impact they would have on my daily life. And it doesn't stop there. When I tried to warn others by leaving honest reviews on my surgeon's websites, describing my regret, the complications, the lack of real informed consent, my reviews were deleted. Think about that. A surgeon permanently altered my healthy body when I was a middle school student, and then erased my negative feedback to protect his reputation. If that doesn't sound like fraud, I don't know what does. In any other context, selling a medical product in this way, with half-truths and hidden side effects, would be considered fraud. If a pharmaceutical company pushed a drug on children without disclosing the lifelong damage it can cause, they would be sued out of existence. If a cosmetic surgeon buried evidence of complications, they would be shut down. But when it comes to gender medicine, it's not just allowed, it's celebrated. And anyone who asks questions is called hateful. Every week I hear from more young men and women like me, people who were convinced as kids or as teenagers that the only way to survive was to become a lifelong medical patient. We now live with the irreversible consequences, the scars, the side effects, the pain, and the grief. And we watch helplessly as the same professionals and clinics keep selling the same product to the next generation of vulnerable kids while silencing those of us who speak out.
I was a teenager. 4 words, and yet there's so much packed into them. Pain, hindsight, a reckoning with a younger version of herself that she can no longer fully recognize. The young woman in that clip is one of a growing number of people who made life-altering decisions about their bodies and their identities, and who later came to question, and in some cases deeply regret, those decisions. They are called detransitioners, and today we are going to listen to them. Not to score some political points, not to argue about legislation or healthcare policy, not to invalidate anyone's identity or their journey, but simply because these are real human beings with real stories that deserve to be heard, with the same respect and seriousness we would give to any person speaking about one of the most personal experiences of their life. This is the side of the conversation that often gets buried, that gets dismissed, that people are sometimes afraid to bring up, for fear of being misunderstood or accused of having a political agenda. I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This video is not a statement about transgender identity. It is not an argument against transition as a whole. These are millions of people for whom transitioning was the most important and life-affirming decision they ever made, and their experiences are just as valid and real. What this video is about is the people for whom that was not the case, and those people deserve a seat at the table too. So let's start with the basic. What does detransitioning actually mean? Detransitioning refers to the process of stopping or reversing a gender transition. This can look very different from person to person. For some, it means stopping hormone therapy. For others, it means no longer identifying as transgender or non-binary and returning to identifying with the gender they were assigned at birth. And for a smaller number of people, it involves attempting to reverse surgical procedures, though that is not always medically possible, and the stories around that are among the most difficult in this entire conversation. Now, people detransition for many different reasons, and this is important context. Research shows that for some people, detransitioning happens because their gender dysphoria resolved over time, often alongside treatment for underlying mental health conditions. For others, it was family and social pressure that pushed them back, and for others still, it was a genuine realization that transition did not address what they were actually struggling with. The stories we are covering today fall mostly into the final category. These are people who, often as teenagers or young adults, underwent some form of medical transition, and who later came to believe that the decision was made too quickly, without enough psychological support, and sometimes under social influences they were not fully aware of at the time. That is a very specific and very human story, and it is one that more and more people are sharing publicly, many of them on TikTok, because they feel that the medical and media establishment has not made enough room for their voices. I've found these clips on TikTok. These are real people who chose to share their stories publicly. I am going to play their words, give you space to actually hear them, and then offer my own reflection on what they said. I want to be a guide through this conversation, not a narrator who tells you what to think. Let's get into it.
Gender reaffirming surgery. Here's a honest update. Do I regret it? Short answer is yes. Why do I regret it? Well, because I will never be able to live a normal life. After the surgery, you have to start dilating to keep the space they gave you. You start from doing it 4 times a day to once a week for the rest of your life. I was fine with that. See, the problem is I had major complications, and now for some reason I need to do it every single day. So it's not really worth it to me. The problem is I cannot stop. If I stop, it's going to close up and create a bubble, and that bubble could literally create an infection that could... The two options here are I dilate for the rest of my life, or I get it removed surgically. Surgery goes for $70,000, and I don't want to go through that again, so I guess I'm dilating.
He really presented this as basically the only option to both me and my parents. And I also, the problem with me starting it so young was not only that I couldn't consent, I couldn't really fathom the full picture of things. I've also I'm still experiencing a wide range of complications to this day. You know, from the surgery, you know, I'll never be able to breastfeed. I'll never have that erogenous sensation in my chest back. I'll never have my breast back. The reconstruction will do nothing for me, and it might make things worse actually, because I've had some complications pop up this year with the grafts. I have to cover them up with bandages, or else I don't know what's going on with them. I tried to consult my surgeon about it, and he didn't really investigate. He gave me advice that made the complications worse even, and actually temporarily gave me an infection. But I have to bandage up every day so that it doesn't like leak all over my clothing or bedding.
When I was a teenager, I briefly identified as non-binary, and I had some body issues and some gender dysphoria issues, and I decided to get top surgery. And I also had my nipples removed as well when I was like barely 18. I never intended to get anything else done. I wasn't intending to go on hormones or anything like that. However, since then, I have come to regret that decision. I do not feel the same way towards my body that I did before. And I've learned to deal with what body issues I do have in different ways. And I think there was other reasons for why I was feeling the way that I was feeling that weren't really addressed. But that's just my personal experience. I don't hate my body with top surgery. I think that I look fine. I'm not going to get like reconstructive surgery or anything like that. But yeah, I would not have made that decision now at 26 that I did when I was 17 and 18.
A biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male through synthetic hormones and surgery. I will never be a man. Is it transphobic for me to tell the truth? Why is it that a couple hundred years from now, if you dug up my body, they're going to go, yeah, that was a woman, had babies?
I think once I decided to actually like make permanent changes to my body, I was dedicated to not changing my mind. I knew that there was going to be certain things that would be irreversible, but I had sort of mentally trained myself to see that as a great thing. Like, my voice will never go back. Good, awesome, I never want it to. I'm 24 years old. I transitioned in 2015 when I was 17 years old. Was trans for 5 years, almost exactly, and then started detransitioning in May of 2020 at the age of 22. I think in middle school is when I just started to feel very awkward and not comfortable. I wanted to present masculinely all the time. When I turned 18, I learned that I could obtain testosterone through informed consent, which is basically when you go to the clinic and they kind of go through all of the possible risks. And in my experience talking to them, they kind of downplayed the risks. They really sort of focused more on the aesthetic changes that I will go through. My voice did deepen because it's really deep for a woman. That just like, you can't change that. Like once the vocal cords thicken, they can't go back. I do feel like my face has sort of gone through some permanent masculinizing changes. I do still grow a little bit of facial hair, and I'm lucky that it's not a full beard because a lot of detransitioned women do end up having a lot of facial hair, and they have to get laser hair removal to get rid of that. There are also a lot of emotional changes. I would get really angry. I had the urge to like hurt people, which I had never experienced before.
I identified as trans from age 15 until about 5 months ago. So that was about 4 years of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, I transitioned. I took testosterone for 3 years, but I never got any surgeries or anything.
What was it that made you feel as if transitioning was the right thing for you? And then on the flip side, what was it that made you come to the ultimate realization that detransitioning was the right move for you?
I think it was a combination of a lot of big things. Mostly, I'd say the biggest factors were I didn't have any friends and I wasn't going to school. And so I didn't really interact with anyone in my day-to-day life besides my family. I'd say also I had a lot of mental health problems when I was going through puberty. And I think I kind of look at it as like my puberty was like medicalized, because when I was having a lot of like mental health problems when I started puberty, I was like, my parents took me to the doctor and they were like, you know, like my kid like doesn't want to get out of bed, like is really depressed, like what's going on? And I think they just tried to medicate me and put me on a lot of pills and like didn't really try to like dig into why I was feeling that way. So from a young age, I kind of felt like, oh, something is just wrong with me, like mentally. And like, I just was trying to figure out what it was.
Right.
And when I found out like about like that being trans was a thing when I was 14, I was like, this has to be like the thing that's wrong with me.
I actually on some level relate to that because when I was younger, I got diagnosed with all types of things because I had behavioral issues, OCD, ADHD, all these things that I definitely don't have. And as an adult, I recognize that I just had behavioral issues and I had stuff I was going through at home. And sometimes doctors do just throw you on anything, which is really, really bad. So you feel as though the issues you were having as a kid set you on a journey to where you were looking for the fix, and you ended up feeling like transgenderism was the fix. You know, there are a lot of changes, bodily changes that come from medical transition, whether it be hormonally or surgery. You said you haven't had surgery. What are some of the effects of hormones, testosterone, that you probably, I would assume, regret now?
The biggest thing that I regret is the change in my voice. That since I started as a teenager at 16, I was still able to get like a cis man's voice, like a very malleable, deep voice.
Right.
And so having to like come to the realization that I don't want to present as a man anymore, and having to deal with the fact that I once had like a perfectly normal like teenage girl voice, and just let testosterone like destroy it. Like that's how I feel, and it's like really hard to deal with that.
Right.
And then the other thing that is like, it bothers me, but it's not that hard to deal with, is like I have some facial hair. Mm-hmm. And it's not that bad because I only have to shave like every 3 or 4 days, which in the grand scheme of things is okay. But
and there's laser hair removal and
stuff
like that.
Right. Yeah. So like 3 years is especially as a teenager, like that's a long time to be going through hormone treatment.
It does a lot in 3 years.
It does.
I started my transition actually technically as an adult. I was 20. And I mean, even the changes from that was like a lot. So it's even more so when you're a teenager. So yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah. I'm just like, I feel positive most days because I know like I'm still really young. Like I'm 20 now. And so I get to see like the effects of like the estrogen just like coming back into my system. And I've still like, it's changed my face a lot already. And people will see me and they'll kind of be like, wow, you look really different. And that's cool to see already. But yeah, like the voice, like, that's just, oh my gosh, like every day I just like, whenever I go out and I'm like, yeah, like I look totally feminine, but then it's like the second I talk, it's like, oh, I get a weird look.
Hey everyone, it's me, Maddie. I am a detransitioned woman, and a lot of people ask me this question about my voice. So I'm a female person who took testosterone for 5 years, and because of that, no, my voice will not change back. So testosterone physically stretches the vocal cords, so it is a permanent change, meaning my voice will pretty much sound like this for the rest of my life, which is something that I accept and I am okay with. I think that at this point, because of the journey that I've gone through, my voice is my power, and so when I speak my story, you can hear my experience in my voice, and I think that is actually a very powerful thing. And of all the changes that are permanent from what I've gone through, my voice has been the easiest for me to accept, to be honest. Of course, I feel some insecurity about it at times, but for the most part, I love my voice, and I am proud of the woman that I am today and the voice that I carry with me.
Hi, my name is Prisha Mosley. I'm a detransitioner, and I wanted to talk some today about regret over misplaced trust. I have a lot of regret over putting so much trust in the trans community and in trans activists and my doctors when I believed that I was trans. I feel really regretful over taking everyone's words exactly as they said it and not doing more investigation into my own feelings, my own self, maybe I wish I had been given suggestions for other ways to deal with my trauma, my anxiety, my depression, the mental struggles I was going through, instead of just affirmed and told that all of my struggles were really because I was born in the wrong body. I feel a lot of regret over the time I spent talking to other people who felt the same way and just encouraging each other to live in a false identity and in a false way, even if we ultimately thought because of our doctors that it was real and we were really transitioning and changing sex. I feel so much regret over putting so much hope and trust in this community that ultimately turned on me and betrayed me when I had a bad experience and decided to speak out about it. Ever since I've been speaking out about my detransition and my experience with regret and the side effects that have come from years of testosterone and having a double mastectomy, I've been harassed online, sent really abusive messages and threats. I've been doxxed. When I've gone out to publicly testify, I've been chased to my car and had a lot of other really scary, difficult things happen to me. And a lot of this has come from the community that I once trusted, that I entrusted myself and my mental health and my healthcare to, and believed, when they said that the first time around that Trump was going to round up everybody in the LGBT community and everything bad was going to happen, and that didn't happen. And then, as soon as I experienced regret, this community, all of the support and encouragement and I guess the lying, it all stopped. I'm no longer treated nicely by the trans community or encouraged in what I do, not even encouraged in trying to recover my health care or discovering my, true female identity, the sex I was born as. So my advice to younger people, who maybe have close ties to the trans community or trust people who are activists, trans is ultimately a scam. It's impossible to be born in the wrong body. It's pseudoscience, and all these doctors and activists really have to offer are cosmetic alterations to make your body appear like the opposite sex, which doesn't cure any type of mental health issue or illness and causes a lot of physical side effects and bodily harm that they aren't giving or discussing fully in informed consent. So my advice would be not to trust a community that will betray you if you don't have the correct experience or if a doctor harms you.
I was 12 years old. I began the process of trying to change my gender from female to male. At age 15, I even had both of my breasts surgically removed. But I realized that what I was doing was actually harming my body. So at age 16, I began to detransition. Planned Parenthood is America's single largest abortion business, but they are also one of America's largest dispensers of trans hormones, including to minors. But do they have any resources for people like me who seek to detransition?
Thank you for calling Planned Parenthood. How may I help you?
Hi there. So I was wondering if you guys have any detransition services.
You would have to contact your insurance for a list of providers.
So you guys specifically don't offer like any services for detransitioning or stopping transition or like reversing any of the effects of it?
No, you'd have to contact one of your insurers.
Would only have gender affirming care services, like for hormones, but not through detransition.
Ooh, that one's a hard one because they know we just do gender referring.
So as far as I know, we usually don't see patients for that. We usually see patients to getting started on gender affirming care.
Why don't you offer detransition services? Is that just something that's not listed, or?
I mean, I really wouldn't know.
You guys do provide stuff for people who are going through a transition, right? But you guys don't have anything that like involves like maybe reversal of those procedures or any drugs to like treat like the fertility issues from it?
No. We would have had to refer you out for any type of fertility. So I did get an answer back from clinic managers. So it does look like...
Are you still there? Hello? Is this something that you've heard of before?
I've heard of it before, but I've never had somebody call and ask about it.
My manager is actually transgender himself. He has a little bit more information regarding the services that we provide, regarding gender affirming care and stuff.
He might be able to help me out through this as somebody else who's also transitioned.
Okay, yeah, I'm just going to get you transferred, and then just so you're aware, his name is...
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for calling Planned Parenthood. This is... How can I help?
I need some help with potentially detransitioning, and she told me actually that you're transgender yourself.
We usually recommend just like talking to a provider who can kind of walk you through all that medical stuff.
Well, you guys able to help me get my breasts back then?
So unfortunately, we don't provide any sort of like surgical services at our clinics, but we could definitely provide you like a referral to reconstructive surgery if that's what you're looking for.
I feel like I've been kind of traumatized by everything that I've been through, and I was hoping that maybe like through hormones I'd be able to have like my breast tissue grow back, and I don't know if that's possible.
So unfortunately, that's not something I personally would be able to answer. I'm not 100% sure on what the like medical side. I'm not going to be able to get you scheduled or be able to provide more resources. I think they will have to let you go.
Lived my whole life unable to love myself as a man, fully convinced that I was somehow born in the wrong body. Then in 2017, I started seeing a gender therapist, got prescribed female hormones. 2 years later, in 2019, I had gender confirmation surgery. Why? Because it felt like the right thing to do. If you detransitioned now, that means you weren't really trans then. But the whole power in my message, the power in my message is to let you know that actually I was in the same place that many trans people are. Your own mind can convince you to make permanent alterations to your body and think that that is fully right, and almost every one of them says the same thing, that they honestly believed they were born in the wrong body. They honestly believed that taking hormones and doing the surgery was the right thing in every way, shape, and form for them at that time, like I did. And so what my mission and goal is to make people aware of this possibility, to make those who are seeking gender transition as an answer to their issues, to find happiness, The only reason you are so convinced that that is the way you need to go is because a sequence of events and ideas and perspectives formed in your mind to cause you to want to go towards that path.
So I noticed there were a lot of people on Twitter saying things about, like, my account was just started in 2023. I'm sorry that I gave myself time to process, time to work through things before I jumped on Twitter and started. I know all of you take one hormone and then you become trans rights activists. I wanted to give myself time to really explore my feelings and detransition before I shared them with you. But if you want to see the truth, this is the truth. I'm an almost 30-year-old man. This is what I look like. This is what I sound like as an almost 30-year-old man. This is what happens when you let people transition in adolescence before they've had a chance to grow up. Before they had a chance to even learn who they were. Not just let, but pressure. Pressure people to transition at these ages. Young, vulnerable people who are already so suggestible. And I feel like everyone is ignoring the pain because they are afraid that it threatens their choices and their narrative. If you want to transition in your 20s, you've had a chance to be a man or a woman, and this is what you want to do, okay, that's one thing. But the active pressuring of people to transition so they can preserve their femininity, which is what happened with me, I was told that if I allowed myself to age, that I would become masculine and that it would never be possible and that I would do it anyway, and that I would be a more masculine transgender person like them. And so I made the choices that I thought were right for me at the time. I do take accountability. I did it in secret from my parents. I take accountability for all my choices. But when is the trans community going to take accountability for theirs? For leading me down this path? This is the face of an almost 30-year-old man. This is the voice of an almost 30-year-old man.
Your left testicle weighs this much, your right testicle weighs that much.
I gave this speech at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs on October 23rd, 2019. 4 years, almost to the day before I detransitioned this. I haven't watched it ever since I posted it, really, because, you know, it's kind of uncomfortable for me to watch.
3.5 months ago, I had what everyone calls the surgery. Everyone wants to know that, whether you had the surgery or not. And an interesting experience I had was about 4 days after I had the surgery, I get this notice on my phone, your test results are in. I look at it, test results, what's that? I said, your left testicle weighs this much, your right testicle weighs that much. And I had a moment, I was like, that's my body parts. Just talking about, they were removed off my body. And I actually felt a little sadness about that because these are body parts I carried around for 37, 38 years of my life. But it feels so good to be rid of them now because it never felt right for them to be there.
Oh my God. That is the point that I want to make to people, that you can be so fully convinced with everything you are. You know, people love to tell me, well, you weren't really trans. If you're detrans now, you weren't really trans to begin with. I was just as trans as any of these other people. We live in a world where everybody just, this idea of becoming something different, and then you'll be happy. I mean, it's all around us. The commercials for makeup for women, wear this makeup and you'll be more beautiful and be more happy. You'll feel better about yourself. That's all it is just this constantly chasing a feeling of happiness, feeling of safety, feeling of security in life. And as long as you're constantly chasing the next thing, the next dopamine hit, the next happiness, you're going to live in an unhappy state. I hear trans women and trans men all the time talk about how it's a constant chase for the next thing, the next surgery, the facial feminization surgery now. It's always trying for something. You're always aiming at a goal, and it's a goal you'll never actually get to until you learn to be present and love yourself just the way you are. You will just constantly chase something.
What made you start detransitioning before a man came in my life? Born a woman, transitioned into a man, then detransitioned back into a woman, all by God's grace. And let me tell you, what had me detransitioning was God's mercy on me and his grace while I was still sinning.
My name's Scott Nugent. I'm a lesbian and I'm a trans man. But my most important role is that of a parent to 3 incredible children. I'm a mother, a woman who has given birth and carried life. I'm here today to put an end to the idea that medically transitioning children is about human rights. It is not. It's about money. Market research predicts that gender-affirming care will generate more than $5 billion a year in less than a decade. The truth is that medical transition is experimental, dangerous, and it doesn't cure anything. In fact, your question, there's only 7 studies that stated that medically transitioning children is beneficial, and every single one of them has either been modified with not enough time or participants, or, oops, we were sorry. Yet these are the pamphlets and the studies that are still given to parents, currently. And of course, society doesn't know that because you don't cover it. We now have children's hospitals all over Europe, halting and banning all childhood medical transition, calling it the worst medical scandal in modern history. Yet here in the United States, we have bigots everywhere. We have transgender people. We have gays and lesbians trying to talk. And people that are not trans and not gay and lesbian are calling us bigots. I underwent close to $1 million worth of surgeries and hormone therapies to change from Kelly to Scott, a trans man. And then I almost died in the process. And I certainly have cut many, many years off of my life. In fact, I probably won't live long enough to meet my grandkids because I still, to this day, get recurring infections. Nobody knows why. But again, 95% of all medical transition is experimental, except for top surgery. We have no idea what's going to happen to these kids because it's never been studied. But we are seeing early onset osteoporosis. We are seeing hearts and lungs the size of 12-year-olds. And if you couple that with the only long-term study that followed these transgender people for 30 years in Sweden, Sweden is the leading country for transgender medicine. 2 months ago, they halted and stopped all medicalization of children. Do you know why? Well, there's a documentary that you won't find here in the United States, but they're finding something in addition. Girls' spines are not fusing together properly while on puberty blockers. We have 15-year-olds walking like this for the rest of their lives, and they won't live past 30. But you say he's a bigot. You see, I tried to kill off my female self because I was sold a lie. I was sold that I was actually a man trapped in a woman's body. That my masculine traits and my strong personality were proof that I was really a man. I was told that all my pain and self-loathing would magically disappear if only I pumped my body with testosterone, removed my breasts, and altered my genitalia. I was tricked at 42, at a vulnerable place. One day I thought, God, maybe I'm born in the wrong body. I was married to a woman who just despised being a lesbian. And one comment of maybe I was born in the wrong body. Next week, I was sitting in front of a trans woman therapist who asked me, how long have you been dressing like a man? At 42, that sentence has changed the trajectory of my life. You guys don't seem to understand that I'm not going to meet my grandkids because of this crap. And you call him a bigot. You see, I was perfect just the way I was. If only I was told, and we tell girls, because it's happening to girls way more than boys, is that there is no one way for a woman to be a woman. And there's no one way for a man to be a man. Why don't we start affirming that it's okay to be who they are? No. What we're doing is we're pushing a medical process that if a child gets on it at 14 and lives to 85, that generates $1.5 million in synthetic hormone. Did you guys get that? That doesn't even cover complications. It doesn't cover surgery. And yet you call him a bigot. And you don't talk to me. You show all of the people, trans women are women. We need to let children have the time to learn to love their natural bodies and embrace their differences. Because the truth is that the kids that are wanting to medically transition are the most vulnerable parts of our society.
Detransitioners are fighting back through malpractice lawsuits. Fox Varian is a woman who once identified as a boy, and she got a double mastectomy when she was just 16 years old. Recently, she was awarded $1.6 million for past and future pain and suffering, as well as $400,000 for future medical expenses after winning a lawsuit against her doctors that were accused of pushing the life-altering surgery on her when she was only a minor. Here's the point: to make doctors afraid. It is to make doctors realize that the cost of doing these surgeries, pushing cross-sex hormones, pushing puberty blockers, is too high. I want them to feel like I'm going to get sued. I'm going to lose my license. I'm going to lose millions of dollars if I perform this double mastectomy, if I chemically castrate this child who is deceived about their gender. That's what we want. And you might think that sounds harsh. No, that's the point of these medical malpractice lawsuits, no matter what. We want all doctors to be afraid of messing up. We want there to be consequences for messing up. This is not just messing up. I mean, this is wicked. This is evil. I personally think you should go to jail, especially if it's a minor. If you perform a cosmetic double mastectomy on a minor, if you chemically castrate a child, if you pump a child's body with cross-sex hormones or arrest their puberty because they think that they are the opposite gender, you should go to prison for decades. It's evil. It is abuse. And so this is the very beginning in the road to justice for this.
The teenage brain is not fully developed, and that is not an opinion. That is neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex, which governs long-term decision-making, risk assessment, and impulse control, does not fully mature until the mid-20s. Teenagers are not incapable of knowing themselves, but they are uniquely vulnerable to emotional states, peer influence, and the urgent desire to find an identity that makes the pain of adolescence feel more manageable. And adolescence is already one of the hardest seasons of any human life. Social anxiety, social media pressure, academic pressure, family dynamics, bullying, a sense of not fitting in, a desperate search for community and belonging. These are experiences almost every teenager navigates. For some of those teenagers, gender dysphoria is also a very real part of that landscape. And for them, transition genuinely helps. But what these young women are describing is what happens when that emotional context becomes the lens through which permanent decisions are made, without enough slowing down, without enough psychological support, and sometimes without fully informed consent about what the long-term consequences might look like. They are not angry, they are not running, they are just sitting with it, trying to explain. And I think that is one of the most striking things about so many of these stories. These are not bitter people looking for someone to blame. They are thoughtful people trying to make sense of an experience that changed their bodies and their lives in ways they were not prepared for. And they deserve to be heard with that same thoughtfulness in return. Nobody warned me. That phrase, or some version of it, comes up again and again in detransitioner stories. And I think it points to something really important about the way this medical pathway has been discussed, particularly in the last decade. There has been, within many medical and cultural institutions, a strong emphasis on affirming and validating, which is not inherently wrong. The history of how transgender people have been treated by medical system is genuinely troubling. For decades, trans people were pathologized and denied care. The pendulum swung, understandably. toward affirmation. But what some of the people in the stories are describing is a pendulum that swung so far that asking carefully measured questions, slowing down, exploring alternatives, ensuring the person fully understood the permanence of what they were considering was sometimes treated as a form of gatekeeping or bias, and the result for some individuals was that they moved through a medical system that affirmed them at every step but did not fully equip them to make a truly informed decision. Now, I want to be careful here because this is a genuinely complex area. The debate about what constitutes appropriate care for young people with gender dysphoria is ongoing in medical communities around the world. Different countries have reached different conclusions. There are researchers, clinicians, and former patients on multiple sides of this conversation, all acting in what they believe is good faith. What I am not here to do is tell you what the right policy answer is. I genuinely do not think that is my place. What I am here to do is honor what these people are saying, because when someone tells you nobody warned me about something that changed their body permanently, that is a serious statement. That is a failure, not necessarily of any individual, but of a system of care that may have moved faster than the evidence and the safeguards could keep up with. And that failure deserves to be acknowledged loudly, compassionately, and without making the person who experienced it feel like they are a problem to be managed. One of the themes that comes up in many of these stories is the role of social environment, the influence of friend groups, online communities, the particular culture of certain corners of social media where specific identities became deeply associated with belonging and acceptance. And I want to approach this one carefully because this is an area where the conversation gets particularly heated. There is a concept called social contagion, the idea that certain behaviors, identities, or beliefs can spread through social networks, particularly among young people. It is a well-documented phenomenon in psychology. It is why fashion trends, slang, and even certain emotional expression patterns move through peer groups like waves. Applying this concept to gender identity is deeply controversial, and I understand why. For many trans people, the suggestion that their identity might have been influenced by their social environment feels like a denial of something that is fundamentally true about who they are. And for those people, the objection is valid. But the people telling these stories are not talking about other people's identities. They are talking about their own. They are saying, looking back, I can see ways in which my environment shaped decisions that I thought were purely coming from within. And I think that experience deserves to be taken seriously, not as a political argument, but as a genuine psychological account that some individuals are offering about their own inner lives. Adolescence is the period in which we are most hungry for identity, most susceptible to the gravitational pull of communities that offer us a coherent sense of self, most likely to confuse "I fit in here" with "this is who I am." That is not a moral failure. It is human development, and the fact that it can sometimes lead people to decisions that don't serve them in the long run is something we should be able to discuss without it becoming a referendum on anyone's identity. These stories ask us to hold two things at once. The trans identity is real and valid, and that social influence is also real, and that for some individuals, unpacking the difference between the two took years of lived experience to figure out. And now, this is the part of the conversation that I think is the hardest to sit with, because unlike a lot of decisions we make when we are young, the bad relationship, the wrong measure, the impulsive move to a new city, some of the medical interventions involved in transitioning are not reversible. Hormones can have lasting effects on bone density, fertility, and voice. Some surgical procedures cannot be undone or can only be partially reversed. And for the people in these stories, that permanence is not abstract. It lives in their bodies every single day. And I think one of the things that makes this conversation so emotionally charged is that nobody wants to acknowledge the full weight of that permanence, because doing so feels, to some people, like an argument against transition altogether. But I do not think those two things have to be connected. We can say, for many people, the permanence changes that comes with transitions are a source of deep relief and alignment. Their body finally reflects who they are. That is real. And we can also say, for some people, those same permanent changes become a source of grief, confusion, and loss. Their body reflects a decision they made at a time when they were not fully equipped to understand what they were agreeing to. That is also real. The grief in these stories is not performative. It is not political theater. It is the specific and particular grief of a person who looks in the mirror and sees the consequences of a choice their younger self made, a choice that cannot be fully undone, and that they now have to find a way to live with. That deserves our compassion, not our debate, not our spin, just our compassion. And part of that compassion, I think, is simply refusing to look away from it. I wish I had waited. Of all the things this story circled back to, I think this is the one that comes up the most. Not, I wish I had never questioned my gender, just, I wish I had waited. I wish there had been more time, more support, more space to figure it out before the permanent decisions were made. And I think that wish is one of the most quietly devastating things in all of these stories, because it is such a reasonable thing to ask for. Time. That is all. Just more time. The debate about the appropriate age and timeline for gender-affirming medical interventions is one of the most contested in medicine right now. Different clinical guidelines in different countries reflect genuinely different conclusions about what the evidence shows and what the ethical obligations of care providers are. I am not going to resolve that debate in this video, and I would be deeply suspicious of anyone who claimed they could. What I will say is this: the wish for more time is not anti-trans. Wanting to ensure that young people, especially those who are navigating depression, anxiety, trauma, or other mental health challenges alongside their gender dysphoria, have access to thorough and hurried psychological support before making permanent medical decisions is not an attack on anyone's identity. It is basic care. And the fact that saying so can feel dangerous in the current climate, that thoughtful clinicians have reported feeling pressured to affirm without exploring, that parents who asked questions were sometimes made to feel like they were harming their children, that is itself a sign that something in this conversation has gone wrong. Good medicine requires the freedom to ask hard questions, and these young people are telling us what happens when that freedom gets squeezed out of the room. Now that we have heard from these individuals, I want to take a few minutes to sit with what they share, because across all of these very different stories, from the very different people with very different backgrounds, some common threads keep appearing. The first is youth. Almost all of the detransitioner stories that get the most attention involve people who began their journeys as teenagers or very young adults. That is not a coincidence. It reflects something real about the developmental window in which these decisions are most likely to be made, and most likely to be made in ways that the person later questions. The second is concurrent mental health challenges. A very common thread in these stories is that the gender dysphoria they experienced was happening alongside, and in some cases may have been entangled with other mental health struggles, depression, anxiety, a history of trauma. The relationship between gender dysphoria and these conditions is complex and not fully understood by researchers. But what some of these individuals are reflecting is that addressing the gender dysphoria without fully addressing the other struggles left them still struggling, just in a body that had been changed. The third thread is the speed of the process. Many describe moving through the medical system more quickly than they feel they should have. Therapy that felt like a box to be checked rather than a genuine exploration. Healthcare providers who they felt were not fully engaging with the complexity of what they were going through. A culture, both medical and social, that treated hesitation as a sign of prejudice rather than a sign of necessary care. And the fourth thread, perhaps the most important one, is that they feel unseen, that their stories are treated as inconvenient data points, that spaces where trans experiences are celebrated make no room for theirs, that the very people who should be more invested in good outcomes for everyone navigating gender identity have sometimes been the most resistant to hearing what went wrong for them. These four threads do not tell us what gender-affirming care should look like. They do not resolve the policy debate, but they do tell us where the gaps are, and gaps in care, when you refuse to look at them, have a way of growing. Before I give you my closing thoughts, I want to speak for a moment specifically to what these people in these clips seem to want the world to understand. They're not trying to take anything away from trans people who have found peace and wholeness through transition. That is an important thing to say clearly, because their stories are sometimes used by people with agendas on the far end of this debate as weapons against trans identity broadly. And from everything I have seen and heard in these clips, that is not what these individuals want. They are people trying to process their own experiences. What they seem to want is this: they want young people, especially teenagers who are struggling and searching, to have access to thorough, unhurried, genuinely exploratory psychological support before making permanent medical decisions. They want that support to be free from agenda. They want clinicians who ask hard questions, not out of prejudice, but out of genuine care for long-term well-being. They want their stories to be included in the public conversation, not as cautionary tales designed to scare people away from transition, but as data, as evidence that outcomes vary, as a reminder that quote-unquote fast, do not harm is not a controversial principle. It is the foundation of medicine. And perhaps most simply, they want to be believed. They want someone to look at them and say, yes, your experience was real. Yes, it matters. Yes, you are allowed to name what happened to you without being dismissed or shouted down. That is not a lot to ask, and yet it is, apparently, still radical. This video is called The Side of the Conversation Nobody Wants to Have. And I think the reason nobody wants to have it is because it requires us to hold complexity. It requires us to resist the pull of easy narratives in either direction. It requires us to sit with the discomfort of not having a clean villain or a clean hero. It requires us to care equally about a trans teenager finding the care and affirmation that changes their life for the better, and about a detransitioner grieving a decision they wish they could undo. Both of those people are real. Both of their experiences matter. Complexity is uncomfortable, especially on the internet, where algorithms reward certainty and outrage, and where nuance tends to get lost in the noise. But I think we owe it to the real human beings at the center of this conversation to try. If you are someone who transitioned and found everything you are looking for, I am genuinely glad for you. Your story is real and it matters. If you are someone who is currently questioning your gender and trying to figure out what is right for you, please take your time. Please find a therapist who will really sit with you, not just validate you quickly. Please talk to people with a wide range of experiences. Please give yourself the gift of slowness in a world that is very loud and very fast. And if you're someone who detransitioned or who is struggling with decisions made in the past, I see you. I hope this video made you feel a little less alone. Your story is not a scandal or a political talking point. It is a human story, and human stories deserve to be treated with care.
You know, when you detransition, the dysphoria issues are not gone, especially if you've had surgery, and that's what my warning is to those who identify as trans. There is a possibility that, like me, your perspectives and beliefs about yourself may change at some point. And when they do, if you have had permanent surgery to your body in response to this belief that you are female, you will be very disappointed. You will then be living life again as a man, but not have the parts, or as a woman, but not have your womb and ovaries and breasts and things. That's making permanent changes to one's body based on belief, even if it is a very strong belief, even if it is everything you think you are and is your literal identity, still has the potential of being a huge letdown later.
If you made it this far, I appreciate you watching. Please share this video if you feel it contributed something real to this conversation. And please, in the comments, let's actually have a conversation, respectfully, thoughtfully, the way these topics deserve. Lastly, creators' handles are in the description box below, so go give them some support. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.